Hey everyone, it's Zahava. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be looking at part one of all of the books that I have read so far in the month of January. So these will be the books that I have read between January 1st and January 12th, which is the day that I am filming today. And the reason that we are doing January reads in two parts is because I have read a lot of books in January. I've been working a lot, and because I'm working, I have a chance to listen to a lot of audiobooks, and that of course means that I have a chance to read a lot of books, and I didn't want to get to the end of the month and then forget everything that I've read and then not be able to report to you guys on it. So I have with me my reading journal. This is the 2025 reading journal. Now, if you guys will remember, I had bought out the stock. I don't know if I bought out the stock, maybe I didn't, but I had bought 8 of these journals from Kiki K out in Australia. I had them shipped over to me here in Canada, and because I like these journals so much, I love the format and everything, I decided that I really wanted to use the full journal and not waste any pages. So I did carry over my 2026 reads into whatever pages were left of this 2025 journal. If you guys want to see a 2025 journal walkthrough, let me know and I will get that filmed for you. But basically, I just want to show you just really quickly, I had finished off my year here, 2025, and then I started 2026 pretty much directly after with like all of these reads, which I have, sorry, I knocked the mic. I have some of these reads next to me over here right now, and then I have this here because I think that there are some that I don't have because either they were library reads or they were NetGalley ARCs. So one of the two situations, but I want to talk to you about the books that I have completed so far. In no particular order, let us just get started. The first book I want to talk to you guys about is Whalefall by Daniel Kraus. And this book really shook me. This book shook me. I want to tell you that I gave it, I actually have to look it up now because I don't remember what I gave it. It's a good thing that I have my journal here because it's actually helping me to remember my notes. And you'll excuse me today while we're filming here is because I actually woke up with a bit of a neck injury. I was lying in bed, and I know it's like the worst thing to possibly do, but I was lying in bed kind of reading, supporting my head on my arm, you know, lying sort of stretched out. And then all of a sudden, like I had a muscle randomly pull on me in my neck. So like I have to film today because that was part of the schedule, but I don't really have like full range of motion in my neck right now. Welcome to your mid 40s. So I'm just going to sit here and sort of straight like talk at the camera today, which really sucks because I wanted to film like 2 videos today. So we're going to be looking at the first video, which is this, where I'm going to be talking to you about the books that I've read so far in January, and then I went and did like a haul of eBay books, and I wanted to show you guys the books that I kept aside for my own reading interest, and that's going to be in another video because I know that some of you have expressed to me in the past that you do like to see those videos as well, so I wanted to do that for you in a separate video. So this is supposed to be a horror, psychological thriller, survivalist situation, and I think that Daniel Kraus, when I looked up this author, writes mostly for a YA audience. I couldn't find much in terms of him writing for an adult audience, but this has to do not with, as you would expect, it says on the cover, a whalefall. It more has to do with a father and son relationship, and the son sort of coming to terms with what he thought or what he perceives has been an abusive relationship that he has had with his father growing up. So we are following Jay, who has left home right now. Currently, as we meet him, he's 17 years old, but he actually left home at 15 years old because he could not get along with his family, especially not his dad, and he decided to make his own way in the world. And his father, and it's not a spoiler because it's written on the blurb on the back of the book, has died, and his bones have fallen into the Pacific Ocean, and Jay sort of goes out onto a dive with the aim in mind of trying to retrieve his father's bones and be able to bring them back to his mother and his sisters so that they can have some closure. And then as Jay is in the water and he's doing this dive, which he has told nobody that he's out doing, he sort of gets swept up into what can only be described as a horrific scenario. A giant squid swims by, and he is of course enthralled, and he's watching everything that's happening with the giant squid, and then the giant squid gets swallowed by a sperm whale along with Jay himself, who has become entangled in the giant squid's tentacles. So essentially he gets swallowed by a whale, and we are following him as he tries to escape. And anyway, this is like an amazing read. I gave it 4 stars. The only thing that I would say that kind of kept it from being a 5-star for me is that the prose was a little truncated here and there at times, but the chapters were so short. Chapters could be 1 sentence each. So the pages flip by really, really quickly. So if you're looking for a quick read, this will probably do it for you. And it's not as horrific as all that. It's really about a 17-year-old boy who's using his wits and reflecting about like things that he hated in his past that come back to help him while he's in this situation. So if that's the kind of story that you like, I think you guys will really enjoy this one. I had a really good time with it. I'm happy to give it a permanent place on my bookshelf, and I highly suggest you guys go pick it up. Next, I have The Crash by Frida McFadden. I believe that she published this book in January of 2025. This was not a great read, you guys. Like, don't go out and read it. It's not worth your time. I don't often say that about books. If I am going to say it, trust me, it's because it really is not like one of the best things that this author has out there. You guys know that I really enjoyed The Housemaid. I just saw the movie adaptation over Christmas. I really enjoyed that too. I am going to be continuing in the Housemaid series. I have read Do Not Disturb, which I thought was all right, and I will read more from this author. But this for me was like kind of a waste of time. I gave it a 2.5 stars. I wasn't really invested in what happened in the story. No, sorry, this was not a 2.5 stars. This was actually a 2-star. I gave a 2.5 to something else, which I'll tell you about in a bit, but this was actually a 2-star read for me, which means that it was a very readable book. I actually happened to do this one on audio, but it has to do with a lady who is driving her car and then she crashes into a tree when her brakes go out, and then she ends up getting discovered by this guy who I guess I didn't really like this book so much because the guy they sort of describe as rescuing her kind of reminded me a lot about Eric, because he's 6'4" and he's big and he's burly. Like, you guys have seen Eric sort of ghosting across the screen time and again on this channel, and like the guy that rescues her is described pretty much exactly like my husband. For those of you who don't know, like, Eric is my husband, and like a 6'4", 230-pound, just really, but like a gentle giant type of situation. So he rescues her. He brings her back because they're in this very remote sort of mountainous region, and he brings her back to their cabin where he's got a wife that's kind of who's like a retired nurse, or she's a nurse anyway. I don't know if she's retired, but she's not working. And they nurse her back to health. And I forgot to mention the victim of this crash is actually a 23-year-old pregnant girl. So there's a lot of things going on. Anyway, she ends up being, very quickly, and it's not a spoiler, she ends up feeling like she's being kept captive by this family. And she only has one other person because she was on the way to meet her brother. So her brother is the only other person that knows that she's not at home. And she has to find a way, like, she's been mangled from the car crash, and she has to find a way to sort of get herself out of this situation where she's been locked in this family's basement. And, you know, things come to the surface. Like, I don't want to say more because I don't want to ruin it for you, but I mean, you could read it. It's kind of like when I rate something 2 stars, that to me is a meh rating. Like, you could read it or not read it and it wouldn't make a difference in your life. I don't think it's a riveting book. I don't think that it did for me. It didn't have like all the twists that The Housemaid did. I just overall was very underwhelmed with this book, and I don't know if that was my mood or just because it's not a good book. In any case, this is one that I will be unhauling. So, you know, use your discretion when you read it. If you want just like a nice, easy read that you don't have to pay attention to and you can still sort of glean whatever's happening in the story because you just need like background noise, you could do this one. You don't need to totally focus on this one to understand it, but I just don't think that it really gave me the same kind of tension, and I wasn't as enthralled in this one as I have been in some of Frida's other work. So this was meh. Then I read The Mother-Daughter Murder Night. This one was also kind of a meh to 3-star rating for me. It had really more to do with like 3 generations of women that have to solve a murder. We have Lana, who is the family matriarch, and then we have her daughter Beth and Beth's daughter Jack, who is half Vietnamese and half Jewish, and they talk about that in the novel, which is the reason that I mentioned it, because maybe that's of interest to some people, I don't know. But yeah, they are a Jewish family, and Lana has had a health scare when we meet her, and she basically is a retired business, like she's a high affluent business person, and she moves in with Beth and Jack, who have sort of been living at the beginning of the book a little bit estranged from Lana because, you know, Beth doesn't like Lana's parenting, and she kind of wants to raise Jack the way she wants to raise Jack. Jack is 15 years old, and Jack is very independent, and she goes out onto the water kayaking, canoeing, whatever it is that she does. And then one day while she's out on the water, she stumbles across a body and they get swept up in the investigation because the local authorities seem to believe that Jack had something to do with the murder, or what they soon discover is a murder. And so Lana, being bored, decides to put on her detective hat and go around investigating the murder, trying to clear her granddaughter's name. And it's just how that story unfolds, basically, about how Lana gets involved and how the relationship between the three Rubicon women sort of tightens, and they get closer together as they're unfolding this murder mystery. And look, the book was okay. My description of this book is about as exciting as this book is. So if that gives you an indication as to whether or not you should read it, I mean, I would say use your discretion. Again, like murder mysteries, to me, I really like them to have a thriller component. I really like to feel my heart beating fast. I like to have it be very plot driven and very action oriented, and this was not that. There was a lot of interpersonal character experiences. This one was more of a character driven murder mystery than I am comfortable with. I just don't... I don't know, I found that it got flat for me. I got bored in certain instances, and had I not done this book on audio, I think I probably would have DNF'd it. So it was much easier for me to get through having done it on audio while I was distracted doing other things, like filling my orders or like listing items for sale and things like that. So I wasn't fully paying attention to this, but there's a reason why. Next, I read a really interesting sci-fi that came to me recommended by Ashley of The Answer Is Books, and I will link to her video of, I think it's like 11 underrated books that people are not talking about. So I'll link to that down below if you guys haven't seen that video. But I picked up Drunk on All Your Strange New Words. So what we have here is a very interesting situation. There is like an alien society, and there are these translators for the alien society so that human beings can communicate with the aliens. And what happens is whenever the aliens talk, the translators tend to get a little loopy. They tend to get a little drunk as a side effect, or they experience, symptoms of inebriation whenever they're translating for these aliens. So they have to be highly educated, highly trained in order to become translators. And what this is a genre blend between a sci-fi and a murder mystery, because what happens is Lydia, who is the translator for the alien in question, finds that her alien, or the person or the alien that she's partnered with, turns up dead. And they suspect her, of course, of having something to do with this alien's death. And so, of course, Lydia, now being under suspicion, has to prove her innocence. She has to prove that she didn't, in fact, murder her partner. I don't know how to call him. It's like not a partner, not a client, but the person that she's translating for. So I guess a client. I don't know. I don't know how she gets paid. She gets paid by like the institution that she works for. Lydia just has to basically prove her innocence, and then all of a sudden, as she's trying to work out what happened, she starts to hear these strange voices in her head that she should not be technically hearing, and it sort of goes on from there. So I thought that this was a really good read. This one was also done on audio for me. I was able to get this one, I believe, through my library, and I had a really, really good time with it. I would suggest you guys pick it up if you like a genre blend, and you really cannot go wrong. I also picked up The Mystery Guest. This is the second in the Molly the Maid series. This is by Nita Prose. I'm not really going to talk too much about the plot of this novel, because if you haven't read the first one, I don't want to ruin this one for you. I will be reading the third one, which I think comes in a yellow cover, and as you know, I spoke to you guys about the series before on the channel. Molly's character does grow and improve, and some suspicions that we would have had, or we would have figured out, that are painfully obvious to us in book one, finally come to light for Molly in this book here. So I'm happy to see that her life is coming together in such a nice way, and I will be continuing on with this series for sure. I also picked up Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor, and unfortunately for me, this one was a DNF at around 53%. So I had taken this one out as well from my library, and it just fell so flat for me right in the middle of the book. I really like the premise up until that point where we're following Zelu as she's disabled, and we get to figure out why she is disabled. She gets let go from her job. She decides she's going to start writing a novel, and then it sort of goes back and forth between her past and her present and her relationship with her family, and ultimately it didn't do enough to keep my interest. It got flat around the middle, and I just didn't really care what was happening anymore. There were other things that I wanted to read, so I just put this book down, and I'm pretty sure I will be unhauling this one because I think that somebody else might really, really enjoy it. I have read the Binti series. I do have a copy of Noor, which I intend to read and haven't read yet, but I have it. It's on the book tree right behind me, but I didn't like this one, and I know that this book has had some mixed reviews because people were expecting something, I guess, a little less introspective from the main character. And yeah, I mean, it also had some conflicting plot lines, which I didn't really connect with. Like, I would have been okay with it if it was just Zelu's story and Zelu's like memoir of how she got to be a paraplegic and her relationship with her toxic family and what have you. But then they interspersed it with scenes from the novel where she was writing about an android, and then we were reliving the android's experience and the conflicts that the android in her novel that she was writing was living. So it was a little too multi-layered for me, and that's where I kind of lost interest in the story. So just, if you're going to read it, know that it's going to be a story within a story. And if a story within a story could leave you somewhat muddled and confused, it doesn't always leave me muddled and confused, but it kind of, maybe it does, but maybe on audio. Maybe that's what my problem was, because I'm just now realizing that when I tried to read the Buffalo Hunter Hunter, that aspect also of a story within a story in the Buffalo Hunter Hunter kind of like, it was hard for me to keep track of because I guess you don't see the page breaks. So it's a little hard for me when I'm listening to something on audio. But that being said, I wasn't really that interested in what was happening. So I ended up DNFing this book, and I will be unhauling. Fun fact, we are back filming this portion of the video for a second time because when I went to transfer over all of my video files, I discovered that none of this part of the video had recorded. So hopefully this will come in a lot better. I want to talk to you about 2 more physical books that I have, and then a bunch of ARCs that I got on NetGalley. I don't think it's gonna make much of a difference for you guys, but it's just really annoying for me. So let me talk to you guys about the last 2 books that I have next to me here. The first one is The Locked Ward. So this has to do with a girl by the name of Georgia who has been put on a 72-hour psych hold after being suspected of having killed her younger sister, Annabelle. And she actually gets in touch with her twin sister, who is Amanda. Georgia knows about Amanda, but like Amanda doesn't know that she has a twin sister. So she gets in touch with Amanda to try and help her prove her innocence. So I know it could kind of be like a little bit confusing, but this was a book that I had recently hauled from Librairie Clio off of their discount rack, their 2 for $10 discount rack. This was the book that I ended up giving a 2.5-star rating to because it was just like a little bit more than meh, and the little bit more was basically because I had put in the effort to physically read this book with my eyes. I think that it's a pretty standard mystery thriller, psychological thriller. There's not really much I can say about it other than that without giving too much away, but what I will say that really annoyed me about this book a lot was that George's character was written in the second person and Amanda's character was written in the first person, and I would have preferred had both of the characters been written in first person point of views, because just the second person point of view for Georgia really didn't work for me, and it didn't really add anything to the story. I think that because there were supposed to be some reveals, perhaps the author decided to go that route to give us like an idea of what it could be like for somebody who was in a locked psych ward, but ultimately it didn't really, I don't really think it would have made a difference. I think if we had had a first person point of view from Georgia's perspective, it would have been fine, except that that would have potentially made her an unreliable narrator of her own story, because she's the one that like has secrets and stuff. So I don't know, this book like didn't really work for me for those reasons, and I think it had kind of mixed reviews on Goodreads as well. This was my first by this author. I would read more from this author before deciding if this author is right for me or not right for me. Maybe this is just not one of her stronger works. If you have read anything by Sarah Pekkanen, let me know, because I know that this author is on a lot of people's sort of auto-buy lists. I think I heard some other YouTubers saying that recently in some videos that I had seen, but like for me, I don't know. I didn't really love this one, but I didn't hate it either. So I can't decide if I want to unhaul it or not. You know, I'm kind of in this like purgatorial state with this book because I did read it within like 4 or 5 days or something, which is pretty good for me considering that I was doing a lot of audio this month. But over the course of 4 or 5 days, it was an interesting enough read. It's just that I don't know if I loved the use of a second person point of view for one of the characters, which is like really, as you can see, the major sort of stickling point for me. But yeah, let me know if you've read this one, what you thought of it, or if you've read anything else by this author, because this was kind of just like meh, 0.5. And another author that I tried for the first time this month, it was actually the first book that I completed in the month of January, and that is Sundial by Catriona Ward. I have never read from this author before, and I really enjoyed this book. I had a really, really good time with it. It's got a very sort of eerie gothic feeling to it. bit, even though it takes place in modern times. So we're following Rob and Callie. Rob, who is the mother, Callie, who is the 12-year-old daughter. Rob has another daughter and a husband who she doesn't really get along with. And basically, Callie, who is 12 years old, is starting to randomly exhibit these very weird tendencies that Rob is naturally worried about. So she decides that she's going to take her daughter away and go back to the home where she grew up, where Rob grew up. And she's going to just sort of spend some mother-daughter time with her daughter as they sort out all of the weird things that Callie has been up to, because Callie has been potentially harming her younger sister, and Rob is not currently getting along with her husband, who she's pretty sure is cheating on her, so she just needs a break. So she takes Callie back to Sundial, which is the kind of compoundish situation that they grew up on, and her husband, Rob's husband, doesn't necessarily feel comfortable up there, but he knows about it, and he's just going to let them kind of have this mother-daughter time that they need. And basically we are following them as their history is sort of divulged, and maybe we're starting to find out why Callie is up to these peculiar, harmful things. So this was actually a 5-star read for me, and it was my first by this author, as I've said, and I know that this book didn't necessarily get such high ratings, but for me, I really, really enjoyed it. It was very gothic, as I said, very atmospheric. It's definitely got some horror elements to it. I really enjoyed this, and I would definitely read more from this author. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you guys about the ARCs that I got, or properly speaking, those were advanced listeners copies, as well as some library books that I read that I don't have a copy of. So the first one that I want to talk to you about is actually going to be a library book. It is A Curious History of Sex, and this is sort of a lighthearted overview of sex throughout history. So this book is a nonfiction. I think the subject is pretty self-explanatory. I really enjoyed the author's description of the female menstrual cycle, or what it's like to actually have your period, which if you guys want a beeline to, you can find that on page 260. That one had me absolutely in stitches. I was dying for how relatable that page actually was. It's just like a very sort of general overview of sex throughout history. She talks about both men and women. It's not necessarily given from a feminist perspective or any kind of perspective. In fact, it's very neutral. And yeah, it's just a really nice, accessible survey that is a light nonfiction read for those of us that are wanting to get more into nonfiction. It's not, you know, it's a little bit titillating, but not in like a smutty way. And there were some points in the book where it did kind of fall flat, and I wasn't really interested in the particular subject that was being reported on in that chapter, but I don't have the book anymore. I did return it to my library. I had it on my Kobo, but it's since been returned to my library. But yeah, I enjoyed this book, and overall I gave it 4 stars. The second nonfiction book I tried in this half of the month was 99 Ways to Die and How to Avoid Them. And this was a book that was given to me as an advanced listener's copy via NetGalley. It's written by a real ER doctor, and it was kind of a disappointment. I did DNF it, and that is because I didn't get what I was expecting. I think that the author kind of, or maybe it was the author, the publisher, I don't know, or the teaser itself that let me down, because basically I thought that I was going to be getting an ER doctor's perspective of freak occurrences that she had seen show up in the ER of people doing really dumb stuff that could get them potentially killed. And that's not what we got at all. So that was like a real disappointment for me. Basically, she was talking about don't do drugs, don't put mangoes up your butt, don't like have unprotected sex, don't take expired antibiotics. It was that kind of a thing. And I really don't feel like I needed to have a book about that, because I feel like those are things that I could have probably figured out on my own and that are really based on common sense, you know? And I don't know why a book needed to be written about that. I could understand a book that would have been written about an ER doctor's experience of people doing, like I said, dumb stuff or freakish stuff and coming into the ER with like, you know, like nail guns to the head and things like that, but that's not at all what it was. So it was kind of a disappointing read, and I don't feel that I got what I was promised or what I was led to believe that it was going to be from the teaser, or maybe I just made that up because it's something that I would want to read and that's what I was hoping that it was. But then I actually went to the comments after I decided to DNF this title, and I saw that there were a few other people that had been, I want to say, misled or thought that this book was going to be what I thought it was going to be. People that go, you know, cave exploring and like deep diving and like whatever, or maybe exploring like volcanoes or base jumping or stuff where like like people could, or just maybe even doing like renovations around the house where people are just doing, or trying to film reels and doing like really dumb stuff, and that could get them killed. But that's not at all what this book was. So it really just fell flat for me really quick. I think I got 48% of the way through before I decided that it was really disappointing, and I ended up DNFing that one. Then I read Nobody's Baby, which was the follow-up to the Dorothy Gentleman series by Olivia Waite, and that centers around a detective who is based on a spaceship. The first book in the series I gave 5 stars. This one I gave 2 stars. 2 stars. This was not a good book. I think it was meant to like follow in the footsteps of the first book, which is meant to be a cozy mystery series taking place on this spaceship, but it just didn't do it for me because, again, even with a cozy, this was a novella, it was 144 pages, and shame on me if I couldn't plow my way through it. So I did force myself to read it. I got this as an arc on my Kobo, and it just was not good. It was just not good. It was a very weak, flat follow-up to a book that I had originally absolutely loved, which was Murder by Memory. And I was really disappointed with this one. And I feel like I want to give a shout out to Danny of Danny Dabbles if you are watching this video, because when you put out that video about what do we do when our favorite authors disappoint us, I'm with you in that camp. I'm with you in that camp on this book right here. So I was not a fan of this one. I would not buy it. And yeah, I was just generally disappointed. And I didn't even tell you what it's about. It's about a baby that like mysteriously appears on the ship where there's not supposed to be babies, and there haven't been babies for like 300 years. So they have to find out where the baby came from. They have to find out who its parents are, what it's doing on the ship, and then like what to do with it afterwards. So it was just not an interesting premise, and it wasn't executed with any kind of tension. It was not enthralling. It was not interesting. So yeah, I would really like, I want to forget it. I want to forget it. Next, I got an advanced listener's copy of Lady Tremaine, and this is a fairy tale retelling. So that's point number 1, a feminist sort of retelling of the Cinderella story through Lady Tremaine's eyes. And this was a 4-star read for me. It is a historical fantasy romance, and it takes us from Lady Tremaine's growing up to how she gets married, how she has her first 2 daughters, and then what happens as she meets the Cinderella character's father. And then it sort of goes adjacent to the Cinderella story arc that we're familiar with. And I think that, to the author's credit, I'm glad that they decided to do that, because I think that we would have been really led astray if we didn't at least have the Cinderella story somewhere in the background of the plot of this story. So to the author's credit, she did kind of stick to that a little bit, but we got the perspective of Lady Tremaine and the stepsisters as well as we're being led through that retelling. So yeah, I really like this book. It has a very dark gothic feel, as you would come to expect. It's a first-person narrative about what a mother will do to protect and raise and nurture her children. And I just happened to notice that like this author made me annoyed with the Cinderella type character, which is the first time that's ever happened to me in my life. So I think that that's a really good sign, because I was like, oh my God, every time there was a Cinderella scene that came up, I wanted to like punch her, Cinderella, in the face. Like not the author, but like Cinderella herself. I wanted to punch her. So like, I think the author did a really great job. I can see this book, if it gets the right hype, I can see it becoming an instant success. I think it is going to be a much beloved book, and I believe, I want to say that maybe it comes out in February, but I'll check and put it across the screen for you guys if you're interested in picking it up. But I had a good time with it, 4 stars. Another NetGalley advanced listeners copy that I got was Two Wives. This was an extremely forgettable novel. I cannot tell you what the plot is. I have no idea what happened. I just know that I made it all the way through as background noise while I was working. It went into my brain, it went out of my brain, and it is gone into the ether forever. So I have no idea what that book was about. I just wanted to tell you that I read it. And then lastly, I read possibly what is going to be like, I don't know, I hope it's going to be the newest sensation of 2026. Like if this one doesn't win awards, I don't know what's wrong with the world today. It is a debut from Cameron Sullivan, and it is called The Red Winter, and it is a retelling of a French, The Beast of Gévaudan, I think. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, because I am re-recording this footage, so I don't have any of my, like my phone I left in the other room, so I can't really look it up, but it's like a French werewolf tale that takes place in like the 1780s, and this one has to do with a warlock who is harboring a demon, so they kind of live like two people in one body, and he is called by the son of an ex-lover of his to kind of go back to an old town that he had been at 20 years prior, when when Sebastian and Antoine 20 years ago had tried to defeat this werewolf that was basically running amok and ransacking the towns and like killing everybody involved. And so we're introduced to Sebastian at the 20 years later when Antoine's son comes seeking his aid and trying to get him to come back to the original town where they were to, again, take care of this beast who has resurfaced after 20 years. And yeah, the first time I recorded this footage, I had a lot more to say about it, but now that I'm re-recording the footage, I actually don't want to say as much as I did because I don't want to ruin the story for you. But this was a beautiful first-person memoir. I mean, it's a fiction novel, it's a fantasy novel, but it's told through the eyes of Sebastian as kind of his memoir of all of the events, because Sebastian himself is immortal. We get to learn about him. And we have 3 different timelines that we're following, but everything kind of wraps up at the end of the novel, and you get to know a little bit more about Sebastian's background and the demon that he has living inside of him. I just wish that there was more of how those two got connected. I think that if the author did talk about it in the story, it was an element of the story that completely went over my head, because I don't recall ever hearing how Sebastian and his demon were originally linked. But you do have a werewolf presence, a warlock presence, you have the clergy that they're running away from, you have the mystery of what is killing all the people in the town. You have a love story, you have the lovers as they come together, and then as they're separate, and then as they reunite. And anyway, it's just like an incredibly fantastic, fantastic tale. The cover really doesn't do it justice. That's like the one thing. I think that the cover is not as good as what the story is inside. So I would be really, really sad to see that this book doesn't win, or at least isn't nominated in like the Goodreads 2026 Fantasy Awards. Like, I really hope that I'm going to see this book at least on some lists somewhere. I don't know what all the lists are. I just sort of look at Goodreads myself, but this was a fantastic read. I gave it 4.5. The only reason that I didn't give it 5 stars is because it didn't leave me transformed, okay? And if I'm gonna rate a book 5 stars, it has to really, really make me feel like I'm a different person after having finished reading it than I was when I had first opened the first page. So this book didn't quite do it for me for that reason, but otherwise it is a book that honestly, 4.5 stars, a great historical fantasy romance, and I think everybody that picks it up is going to really enjoy it, and I'm sure that it's going to be super well received when it comes out in February. So that is going to bring us to the end of today's video, you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me while we discuss the books that I read in the first half of the month of January of 2026. I can't wait to see what the latter half of January is going to look like for me. Thank you so much for being here. I'd love to know what your thoughts are about the books that I've read. Let me know in the comments if you have read any or plan to read any, or which ones are now going to be added to your TBR. I'm excited to see what you think. And yeah, I always have a really hard time with outros, so I guess I'll just remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you want to hang out again, and I will see you again in the next video. Ciao for now.